My boss stole my Super Bowl tickets, which I received from a client after months of working overtime on a project. You should be grateful you have a job, he said. I acted dumb and said, enjoy the game. He had no idea how Monday would be fun. For 4 relentless months, I powered through on nothing but caffeine and pure resolve, sacrificing late nights, early mornings, and weekends spent hunched over spreadsheets instead of hanging out with friends. Every ounce of energy went into one project, an account so massive it promised to redefine my career. And finally it was complete. The client was ecstatic, the presentation impeccable, and the contract signed. Yet the best part was the reward. I found myself rereading an email for what felt like the 10th time. Evelyn, you went above and beyond. Consider these a personal thank you. Enjoy the game. Attached was confirmation for 2 Super Bowl tickets with front row access at the 40-yard line. My heart raced. As a die-hard football fan who had never experienced a Super Bowl, this was more than a dream. It was a milestone. My hands trembled as I printed the email, double-checking every detail. The client had sent the ticket straight to my boss, Robert Faulkner, the senior partner at the firm, since he oversaw all client gifts. I imagined the moment he'd stride into my office, flash that rare approving smile, and hand them over with a well-earned Evelyn. But that moment never came. Then, 3 days later, Robert stormed into my office without even knocking. His usual smug arrogance seemed amped up as he leaned against my desk, as if he owned the very air around me. I heard you received some fantastic news, he said. I smiled, expecting him to finally pass along the tickets. Yes, I really appreciate it. I poured everything into that project, I replied. He nodded, his tone almost amused. You did, which is why I need to discuss the tickets with you. There was something in the way he said talk that sent a chill down my spine. Right. I asked cautiously. With a deliberate exhale as if assuming the role of the good guy, Robert continued. Here's the thing, Evelyn. Clients don't really understand corporate hierarchies. When they sent you those tickets, it was really a gift to the firm, not just to you. My stomach tightened at his words. I protested slowly, keeping my voice steady. But the email clearly stated they were a personal thank you to me. He brushed that detail aside as if it were trivial. I get it, but in our business it's all about relationships and strategic decisions. So I'll be keeping the tickets. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I blinked. But I already made plans. I'm taking a potential investor to the game. It was a smart move for the company. My heart pounded against my ribs. This couldn't be real. After months of grueling work and endless sacrifices, he was just taking them away. That's not fair, I said, carefully measured to contain the storm inside me. The client had given those tickets to me. Robert smirked as if I were an ignorant child. You should be grateful to have a job, he said coolly. That's the real reward. I swallowed hard, gripping the armrests of my chair. This wasn't merely about football, it was about principle, about respect, about a line that shouldn't be crossed. He patted my desk as if I were some obedient pet. I'm sure you understand. And don't worry, you'll have plenty of other opportunities. I forced myself to breathe, to blink, to stay in control. Then, surprising even myself, I allowed a smile, not genuine but one with hidden edges, to cross my face. Enjoy the game, I said smoothly. He grinned, clearly satisfied, and strolled out as if he'd done me a favor. He had no idea how much fun Monday would bring. The moment he left, my fake smile vanished and my hands balled into fists beneath my desk, nails digging into my palms. Did he really think he could get away with this? I sat in silence for a long moment, deliberately slowing my breathing. I couldn't afford an emotional reaction. If I was going to retaliate, I had to be smart. And luckily, Robert had just handed me the perfect opportunity. I pulled up the original email from my client and read it again, my pulse quickening as I formed a plan. The key to taking Robert down wasn't to confront him head-on. That would lead nowhere. But to let him dismantle himself. I quickly texted my client. Thanks again for thinking of me with those Super Bowl tickets. It appears they were given to someone else at the firm. Hope to catch up soon. Less than a minute later, my phone buzzed. Are you serious? Who took them? I smirked inwardly. This was going to be interesting. I played dumb, replying, Not sure, I just know I never received them. No big deal. I let it be. I leaned back in my chair. my heart still pounding for an entirely different reason. This was no longer a battle between Robert and me. It had evolved into a contest between Robert and the client, and I already knew who would come out on top. I spent the rest of the day gathering intel. I knew Robert's inflated ego wouldn't allow him to keep quiet. He'd eventually boast to someone. Sure enough, around lunchtime I overheard him in the break room saying, "Yeah, 40-yard line seats. This is going to be insane. I'm taking a major player with me. You know how it goes. These deals are all about relationships." I stayed hidden, biting back my laughter at his arrogance and sheer foolishness. By Friday the office was abuzz. Robert was leaving early, boarding a flight that afternoon to Super Bowl City. He walked around like a king, smug and untouchable. In the hallway I caught his eye and casually asked, "Big plans this weekend?" In a light tone. He smirked, "Oh, just making moves. Enjoy the game." And I meant it because by the time he landed my trap would be set. Saturday morning brought an update from my client. "I've arranged a meeting for Monday. Just play along, trust me." I grinned. I trusted him completely. Sunday passed, along with the Super Bowl, which I didn't watch for a single second. Not because I'd lost my passion for football, but because I was eagerly awaiting Monday when the real show was about to begin. At 9:07 a.m., Robert strutted into the office, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, exuding the smug confidence of a man convinced he had already won. He barely acknowledged me as he passed my desk and headed straight for his office. I waited until a 9:30 a.m. meeting invite popped up on my screen. Client review, mandatory attendance, conference room, attendees, senior partners, Robert Faulkner, client representative, Evelyn. I clicked accept. It was time for the real show. I walked into the glass-walled conference room and immediately felt the tension. Robert sat at the head of the table with crossed legs, appearing relaxed and confident, though that confidence wavered when the client entered, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize, whose presence sent shockwaves through the room. The client then took his seat. The client spoke. "Robert, this is Andrea Holloway, VP of Corporate Partnerships." Andrea gave Robert a sharp nod as she sat down. Robert blinked. "Oh, of course. Andrea, nice to meet you." The client leaned forward, his smile polite but icy. "Before we begin today's agenda, I have a question. Evelyn, did you enjoy the game?" The room fell silent. I tilted my head in confusion. "The game, the Super Bowl?" I asked, furrowing my brow. "Oh, I didn't go," I replied. The client's expression darkened. "That's odd, because I personally arranged for you to have 2 seats, correct?" Robert froze, a flicker of panic crossing his face, but he quickly forced a laugh. "Oh yeah, there was a mix-up. Evelyn couldn't attend." The client cut him off sharply. "So who did?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. I took a client." The client let those words hang in the air, and Andrea cleared her throat. "Robert, just so I understand, are you saying you accepted corporate seats, intended as a reward for an employee, as a personal gift and then passed them on to someone else without authorization?" The client pressed. Robert swallowed hard. The client continued. "I was really looking forward to seeing Evelyn at the game. A fitting reward for months of hard work. Imagine my surprise when I learned she never received them." Robert began to speak, then hesitated, his mouth opening and closing in a stammer. Andrea then turned to me. "Evelyn, did Robert ever mention any corporate policy that required you to surrender those tickets?" I shook my head, keeping my voice even. "He simply said they were his now." The room tensed. Andrea exhaled sharply. "Robert, you do realize that you not only breached our internal ethical standards, but essentially committed corporate theft, correct?" Robert went pale, leaning back and shaking his head. "I don't think I can continue working with someone who would undermine their own team like this." Robert jolted upright. "Wait, let's just..." The client interjected, turning to Andrea. "I trust you'll handle the internal response." Andrea nodded, her expression unreadable. "Effective immediately." In that instant, Robert understood he wasn't just in trouble, he was finished. And I simply sat back and enjoyed the show. Robert's silence stretched across the conference room like a tightening noose. His face, once smug and filled with arrogant confidence, now flushed a deep red, teetering on the edge of panic. Andrea, the VP of Corporate Partnerships, leaned forward, folding her hands neatly on the table. Her voice was smooth but laced with authority. "Robert, you do understand what this looks like," she stated. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. He knew all too well. The client exhaled, shaking his head. "This isn't just about the tickets, Robert. It's about trust, professionalism, and the expectation that when I choose to work with someone, they won't betray their own team for personal gain." Robert's jaw clenched, his fingers twitching against the table as he searched for an ally. But the other senior partners, who had remained silent until now, exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one wanted to be associated with this mess. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, refraining from smirking or gloating. I didn't need to. The silence persisted until Andrea spoke again. "Robert, did you expense anything related to this trip?" she asked. He blinked in surprise as she tilted her head slightly. "Did you charge the flight, the hotel, any meals or transportation to the firm's account?" The panic in his eyes said it all. The client chuckled under his breath, though there was no humor in his tone. "You used company funds to take someone else to the Super Bowl with tickets that were meant for Evelyn." Robert tried to compose himself. He sat up straighter, cleared his throat, and forced a thin smile. "Listen, I understand how this appears, but I was thinking of the firm. I was cultivating a relationship with a valuable investor." The client cut him off. "What investor?" Robert blinked. "Excuse me." The client leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Who exactly did you take to the game?" Robert's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Andrea tapped her fingers on the table. "Robert, answer the question," she demanded. He hesitated, his mind scrambling for any excuse to escape this hole. I already knew the truth. Robert hadn't secured a high-profile prospect at all. He hadn't brought in anyone influential for the company. Instead, he chose his own brother-in-law, a man with no real business ties, no potential deals, and no legitimate reason to be at the game except to sip overpriced beer and enjoy the premium seats. And every single expense had been charged to the firm. I could see it written on his face, the moment he realized there was no escape. The client shook his head in disbelief before turning to Andrea and saying, "I want it noted that my firm will no longer be conducting business with Robert Fowler moving forward." Robert snapped his head up, protesting, "Wait, that's not." But the client pressed on as if nothing had been interrupted. "If you'd prefer to assign a different senior partner to handle my account, I'm open to that discussion." Then he fixed his gaze on me. "Or, quite frankly, I'd rather deal directly with Evelyn from now on." I kept my expression neutral while inside I was screaming with satisfaction. Andrea nodded in agreement, tapping a few notes into her tablet. "Robert, we're handling this internally. I suggest you take the rest of the week off while we review the situation." Robert's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but the disapproving looks on Andrea's face, the client's stern expression, and the silent judgment of everyone around him said it all. Abruptly, he stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, and stormed out of the room without another word. The glass door swung shut behind him, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Finally, the client turned to me, his expression softening. "Evelyn, I want to apologize. I should have made sure you received those tickets personally." I shook my head. "You had no way of knowing," I replied, glancing briefly at the door through which Robert had just exited. "This worked out even better," he chuckled. "I like the way you think." Andrea then slid a document across the table. "Evelyn, since you're already carrying most of the workload on this account, I'd like to formally offer you a promotion." My breath caught. "A promotion?" I stared at the document before me. A significant salary increase, greater authority, and a title that put me on par with those who had once dismissed me. I swallowed hard and met the client's gaze. "Are you serious?" I asked. She smiled warmly. "Absolutely. You've more than earned it." I exhaled slowly into a grin. "Then I accept." The client extended her hand, adding, "And Evelyn, next time I get Super Bowl tickets, they'll be sent directly to you." I laughed as I shook her hand. Robert might have thought he'd stolen my reward, but in reality, he'd handed me everything I'd ever wanted. And the best part? Monday was just getting started. When I returned to my desk, the entire office was abuzz. Colleagues whispered and exchanged sidelong glances, both at me and at Robert's now empty chair in the corner office. In corporate circles, news travels fast, and when a senior partner storms out of a conference room looking like he's seen a ghost, everyone takes notice. I sat down and fought back a smirk as my inbox exploded with congratulatory emails, messages of support, and even a few puzzled "what just happened?" pings from coworkers who had caught only fragments of the drama. Then came a text from Robert. "Robert Faulkner. What the hell did you do?" I stared at the message for a moment before replying. "Me? Not sure what you mean. I thought you were making moves." I waited, but no response came. I let out a slow breath while glancing at the freshly signed promotion letter on my desk. I had one. But Robert wasn't finished with me yet. About an hour later, an email arrived with the subject, "HR meeting. Immediate attendance required." I opened it. "Evelyn, please report to HR immediately. This is a mandatory meeting." I frowned. Robert wasn't about to back down without a fight. Grabbing my notebook, I headed to the HR office. The receptionist barely made eye contact before gesturing toward a glass-walled room in the back. Inside, Denise from HR sat at the conference table looking uncomfortably serious. Across from her sat Robert. He no longer looked smug but like a cornered animal desperate for an escape. Denise cleared her throat. "Evelyn, please have a seat." I complied. Robert leaned forward with feigned concern dripping from his voice. "Evelyn, I really hoped we wouldn't have to do this, but I need to raise a very serious issue." I raised an eyebrow. "And what issue would that be?" he continued dramatically. "The firm has been reviewing some of your recent communications, and we have reason to believe you violated corporate confidentiality by discussing internal matters with an external client." I blinked in surprise. Denise exchanged a look with Robert before adding, "Robert brought this concern to us this morning." Of course he did. He was clearly trying to flip the narrative and paint me as the problem so he could salvage his own career. I tilted my head. "And what specific confidential business matters are we talking about?" Robert folded his hands on the table and replied, "The emails you sent regarding the Super Bowl tickets were an internal issue, Evelyn, yet you shared them directly with the client." I let out a small disbelieving laugh. "So you're saying that a gift meant for me personally, which was then taken, now counts as an internal business matter?" Denise flinched at the word taken. Robert's jaw twitched as he protested. "I wouldn't call it taken." I cut him off sharply. "Really, Robert?" The client made it abundantly clear in front of everyone. A heavy silence followed as I leaned back. "This isn't about confidentiality. It's about you getting caught and now throwing a tantrum because you must face the consequences." Denise exhaled slowly. "Robert, I understand your concern, but after reviewing the situation, we see no actual policy violation on Evelyn's part." Robert snapped his head toward me. "Excuse me." I glanced down at Denise's notes. The client was the original sender of the gift. He had every right to ask about it. I didn't disclose any proprietary strategy, financial details, or trade secrets. I only mentioned the status of something that was personally meant for me. Robert's face darkened. "So you're just going to let her get away with this?" Denise straightened in her chair. "Let's be clear, you, Robert, are the one under investigation, not Evelyn." Her words hit him like a slap. He began to speak, but Denise cut him off. "The expense reports are under review. The client has formally withdrawn their partnership with you. And now, after everything, you're trying to retaliate against an employee who was just promoted by the company." Robert had nothing left. No words, no argument, he was finished. "Robert, I need you to leave the room." "Evelyn, you're free to go," Denise stated firmly. I gathered my things without even glancing at him and walked out. By the time I returned to my desk, an email had been sent to everyone. Effective immediately, Robert Faulkner was no longer with the firm. His name had been scrubbed from the directory, his office locked, and his belongings already packed by HR. It was as if he had never existed. That should have been enough, but there was one more thing to do. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my client's number. It rang and she picked up on the first ring. "Evelyn," she said, amusement lacing her voice, "I assume you've heard the news." "I have," I replied lightly, thinking I owed her a thank you. "Oh, don't thank me. Robert did this to himself, you just gave him the rope," she laughed. I smirked. "Well, I appreciate you handling it so publicly." There was a pause before she continued in a measured tone. Tell me something, Evelyn, are you happy staying where you are? That made me pause. What do you mean? I asked. She went on casually. Let's look at the facts. You were the one truly building this account. The firm promoted you because they had to, not because they actually valued you. And Robert's departure is all on you. I sat back absorbing her words. To be honest, she continued, I don't like your firm. I tolerated it only because I enjoyed working with you. I blinked in surprise and she chuckled. Let me make this simple. I want you to come work for me. My heart skipped a beat. You've already proven yourself, she added smoothly. You're sharp, strategic, and you don't let anyone walk over you. That's exactly the kind of leader I want for my business strategy team. And of course, I'll double whatever your firm is paying you. I nearly dropped my phone. Double? Not a small raise, but double my salary. I managed to choke out. That's a substantial offer, she replied with a soft laugh. It is, and it's only fair. I hesitated. Everything was happening so fast. I just received one promotion. Was I really about to throw it all away? Then I thought about the years I'd been undervalued at that firm, the times my ideas were stolen and repackaged by men like Robert, and how my promotion had only come about because a scandal forced their hand. Did I really owe them anything? I shook my head and a slow smile spread across my face. Send me the offer. I think I'm ready for something better. By the next morning, my resignation letter was printed and signed. I walked through the office with my head held high, ignoring the surprised whispers and the not-so-subtle looks of admiration. Denise from HR looked genuinely astonished when I handed her the letter. You're leaving? She asked wide-eyed. I nodded. Got an offer I couldn't refuse. She glanced at the paperwork and let out a low whistle when she saw the salary. Damn, she muttered. I can't blame you. I smiled. It was time. As I packed up my things, a few coworkers stopped by to congratulate me. Some were shocked, others not surprised at all. Just as I was about to leave, I received one last message. A text from an unknown number. Robert Fowler. Enjoy your little victory. You just got lucky. I stared at the words for a long moment before replying. Luck had nothing to do with it. And with that, I walked out for the last time. A year later, I stood in my corner office overlooking the city skyline. My name was on the door, my team respected me. My salary was more than I'd ever imagined, and best of all, I was finally working for people who valued me. Scrolling through my phone, I saw an industry news alert. Former executive Robert Fowler had filed a lawsuit against his old firm, claiming wrongful termination. I laughed. He was still trying to fight a battle that was long lost. I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair, reflecting on it all. Robert had spent years stealing credit, stepping over people, and taking what wasn't his, and in the end he lost everything. I, on the other hand, had gained everything I'd ever wanted, and that truly was the sweetest revenge of all.